skip intro, go to this time point.
Forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding. Done.
We've got Richard Simpson here today.
There's always been, this is what Australian cricket are about. They've always been kind of associated with sledging.
Just let him know that you might want to hand it back. I can lend him some stamps if he wants.
They were part of this culture in the past, which is a culture that has always been kind of ingrained in Australian cricket.
Get ready for a broken match.
Charged with attempting to change the condition of the ball.
I know I'll regret this for the rest of my life. I'm absolutely gutted. I hope in time I can earn back respect and forgiveness.
For me, looking forward to having some time off and what's the next step from there. I'd love to stay involved in the game because I love it so much. So,
Fans and the lovers of the game who have supported and inspired me on my journey as a cricketer, I want to sincerely apologise for betraying your trust in me.
So as you see, we've talked so long, the room's changed.
Magic.
By magic, yes. They talk about many ethical things about respecting umpires, and that kind of goes in with this spirit of cricket, as they've termed it. And they take an interesting point about the game itself, is that cricket is one of the most unforgiving sports in the world. It is one of the only two games, and they mention another field game of baseball, in which a single player stands alone against a field of competitors, each of whom seeks to bring them undone. In cricket, one error by a batsman or batswoman is all that it takes, and you're out. So it's interesting to see they got this 1v the world.
It's interesting that the recommendations have been trying to empower umpires a lot more. So
Yeah.
there's especially two recommendations I'm looking here at where, and it's still in progress, so Cricket Australia have kind of argued against it and come back saying we're not sure. So the first recommendation is about the umpires having more of a say in kind of implementing a formal assessment of sportsmanship. So at the end of each game, it is recommended that it be best practice that umpires kind of deliver a report of the sportsmanship of each game, and then that could affect kind of what punishments maybe are given, or what rewards even are given. How Cricket Australia have come back saying this is very hard to implement, but they will kind of look at the existing structures and mechanisms. Another one as well is about umpires having the power to exclude players from the field of play within state cricket for abusive sledging or deliberate breaches of the law and spirit of cricket. Again, that's been kind of not rejected, but it's always been told, like, we see where you're coming from, but we can't implement it. It's very hard.
I can see how it's very difficult because it's so subjective. Unless you had, like, I don't know, something saying no swearing, in which case someone swears, bam, you're off the field.
Get ready for a broken match.
It is a very difficult one to pass legislation for, because I think it needs to be something that's put in for all forms of the game at all levels, about excluding a player from the field. Who knows, maybe a dismissal for getting a batsman out, or for a batsman being out, will be kind of abusive, like uncondoning behaviour.
But they have trialled something, or are trialling at the moment, something similar in football. So you see, for acts of dissent, like yellow card, referee, can result in a sin bin via a means of by one of the linesmen, and that, especially if the referee doesn't want to give it. So, but that it's likewise. They said it's very difficult to implement because of the culture. It's very difficult to implement because even if an official says, right, you're sin binned out, it's they don't want to do it, and third of all, because it's one of those things that this is only a rule variation. It's an experimental rule variation.
I reckon it'll just bring a lot more conflict. So the umpire will send the fielder off from the field of play for abusive sledging or abusive kind of language if they kind of hone it down to that. But it'll become like a football pitch, and as we discussed earlier about the gentleman's game, are we kind of through implementing that rule, like it'd be very hard to manage. The person in question would have to accept it straight away, like, and you know, you've been sent from the field of play, leave, and then it'll just, obviously because of the social identity, you're all behind your own man. You know, there's going to be some defence of it, saying like, oh, but the batsman said something and this, and you know, it's just going to get. I worry that it'll become too much of a football environment, and I think it is very key that that's kind of the ethic, the promotion of moral courage and ethics within cricket is kind of taken from a positive perspective as well as a negative perspective. So one thing I think this report has taken that into consideration. So for example, the kind of honours and trophies that are given out to players, such as the Alan Border Medal or the Richie Benaud Trophy for the Spirit of Cricket, should be taken into account for character and behaviour as well as the performance on the field. And it was interesting that it also said that players who have been penalised for kind of indecent behaviour and kind of abusive acts should not be eligible for such an award. Should be taken into account for character and behaviour, so at international level, state level and everything. Things like leadership, things like accolades and awards, and leadership responsibilities such as captaincy should be rewarded for not just skills on the pitch but character and behaviour, which I think is a good step in the right direction.
It comes into the pro-social, anti-social behaviour debate, and we know that anti-social behaviour doesn't necessarily improve performance within a team if a player's just going to get abused every time they go in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a positive step in the right direction. And I think what's also key as well is about the transparency of the board. That's the well, not rejected, but it's kind of under consideration. But basically, the committee suggested that the Australian board publish their minutes from all their board meetings.
I can't see them doing that.
No, and they've turned around and said, no, we're not, but we're going to look at mechanisms will be reviewed to provide greater transparency. So it was a very fascinating one. I think that was one of the recommendations where the ethics committee have just gone, do this, you know, and the Australians are kind of like, well, no, we want some confidentiality in what we're discussing.
You've got to have some confidentiality, and it is, in a way, I know they've probably done this for protecting identity, and but their report is not exactly without censorship. I can physically see black lines on their actual report, so for them to suggest every bit of their minutes, everything has to be transparent when they're not exactly transparent themselves is laughable.
And it's also interesting that on the matter of the boards, that the board also needs, and it's a simple one, but also them adhering to the code of conduct that's created, and the ethical code of conduct, not just the players, not just the employees that work underneath them. And also when they talk about bonuses as well, when you give like a bonus, it should not take into consideration performance, but for players especially, one thing I'm all for is they provide player bonuses in their wage, not only for their performance or for winning or for things like that, but for how much they engage with the community, how many behaviours they exhibit, which is like fair play, that is in line with their code, like fair play and everything. And I think that's definitely a step in the right direction to kind of promote kind of, and it'll be interesting to see how it's done, because I could see it being complicated, but promoting moral courage through incentives and external incentives such as like money and wage. So rather than seeing, it could be that in the future that Australia have an amazing player who's not necessarily like adhering to the rules and regulations or ethical ones as well as he could be, but then you have a player who's good enough to play for Australia but he's not the star, but he's still earning more because he's a more of a role model for the community. And I think I can see a dilemma there as well, because like it's the kind of skill versus character trade-off. It
depends on who's employing them. If it's Cricket Australia that you say, right, we want you to do X, Y and Z, or we've got it written in your contract you have to do X, Y and Z, it's going to be a lot different than, let's say, the IPL or the Bash coming in.
It's managing expectations, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly. as well as the bonuses as well, it was interesting about kind of internal and about well-being as well. That's the ethic committee address. So addressing the well-being, so they're not coming out with these kind of undesirable behaviours and acting. So, for example, and this goes without saying, you would have thought that this happens already, but consultation to rest players will kind of go on between the player, captain, medical team, and the selectors. And I found that quite an interesting one, and that again brings into the importance of the selectors, because in cricket, in football you get your coach and you get your manager and who pick the team, but in cricket it's a bit different. You have your coach who's in charge of kind of like the performance of the 11 picks, but the selectors are kind of like a board which choose the team or the squad. And again, another good recommendation was for the selectors themselves was to choose an 11 not based solely on skills but on their character as well.
Okay.
And it'd be interesting to see how that's implemented as well, and whether how much selectors will kind of be chosen towards that. But again, I think another recommendation, there's loads of links as you're getting the pattern here, but selectors are to be chosen by the captain and the coach. So it's not just kind of a hierarchy of the board saying you be a selector, you've done your service, you be a selector. But it's the coach and captain who get a choice.
You need a Darth Vader voice as well.
I thought I was trying to up a bass voice. It's more of a say, it's empowering the captain and the coach as well, but at the same time that captain and coach will have to be there by merit, not just on skills but on kind of their character shown as well. So there's kind of like an overhaul suggested here, and to be fair to Cricket Australia, they have accepted pretty much all of it. There's only one thing they didn't reject. There was one rejection they made, and this is very interesting. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on this one. So test match players and one-day international players are to be excused from playing international T20 cricket in order to play for their clubs. Now this was rejected. This was rejected by Cricket Australia, as they feel they should be picking the best team available to them.
I can't really see the report why they'd want this.
I think
really
for me, I see the link is more to the kind of community, and by allowing these star players to play for their club and their grey team and their Sheffield Shield team, then it's kind of grounding them a bit, so they're not, almost on a pedestal. They kind of have that grounding influence, and it's allowing them to kind of be more in touch with the community almost.
But you risk losing the Australian identity from a sporting point of view. So
why do you think that?
Well, we've seen it in England before, and I'm going to use Jamie Carragher, I'm going to use Gary Neville, I'm going to use Rio Ferdinand to a certain extent as an example of this. When Jamie Carragher was interviewed after the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, he pretty much stated that even though it was a good experience, playing for Liverpool and winning for Liverpool would be a greater experience. In fact, playing for Liverpool in itself is greater. Rio Ferdinand said something a bit different. It was only Gary Neville who...
So tribalism is basically the theme. I'm seeing it almost... enjoy playing for clubs more rather than countries.
Probably, but what it is that England lacked a sporting identity at the time. And you risk, I think, with Australia, if you make the clubs more important than the actual national side, you don't have necessarily a national sport. Because with England, it wasn't you're English, therefore you should have this patriotic identity, because that's not going to work. You need one that's sporting. Necessarily. I can
see that side of the debate, the consequences of going too far, but I think there could be a line where you're almost making it playing for your country is you want to be the ultimate goal, but I think the criteria was not to necessarily play all games for your club in the excuses of playing T20 cricket, but I think there was a criteria where they said make sure they play 2 club games and then 1 ODI club game. If that makes sense. Yeah. So they're not being required to play for all the season.
We've seen that with some of the club teams not being able to put out their best players because they're always on international duty.
Very interesting one from two sides of the game. So from your performance, you want your best team out for your country. So they're going to be reluctant, as the Australian cricket team are going to be reluctant because they want to be number 1 in the world. Reluctant to let their best players suddenly go. especially if it's in the lead up to a T20 international tournament. But I think to kind of build a firm ethical foundation, I think they need to kind of allow some contact with state cricket, and I think they've accepted that, but I think they're just kind of, they don't like being told that they can't have a freedom to choose their best team available to them, and I think they don't like the idea that their best players could, rather than playing international cricket for Australia, are playing for their clubs, and that's another debate about identity.
What
I
do
guess.
you think is more important? Is it playing for your club or playing for your nation? And that's what I think Cricket Australia is trying to say, is that playing for your nation is more important than playing for your club.
And again, and it's a very interesting debate which could take up a whole different video.
We're kind of getting off the topic now.
No, but it's again, and that was the one rejection that we had been discussing. There was about 7 under consideration, which we had kind of talked about. So the umpire removing the player from the field of play, under consideration. Umpires having a kind of assessment tool, more of a say at the end of games, under consideration. Surprisingly, the performance player bonuses taken into account as payment for positive relations with the fans and sponsors, that is surprisingly under consideration. I thought that would have been accepted straight away, but
it's a monetary thing, so probably
it's very much, and I can't help but think there's still some people within maybe the cricket board who are still very performance orientated, and it's an interesting one, and there's some more recommendations that are more towards well-being as well, and about the kind of organisational structure. 2 of them that are kind of still under consideration. It's about Cricket Australia commissioning a review of its high performance unit to ensure responsibility for ethical players. So when obviously you've got your high performance sports science team, here we go, immersive sports science. Sports science in the tongue. When you have your sports science team picks players on their psychological strength, their resilience, their physical skills, their technical skills. But now the kind of review to look into them and saying, oh, why aren't you not choosing players on character? Or things, or what, you know, that's kind of been put to a halt. Even though they have accepted that the high performance unit are to be responsible, they're not too keen to have a review. Though they have accepted quite a few, but then they've kind of almost contradicted themselves in a few of them. So they've allowed a review almost of their Cricket Australia as a whole, and the culture and the ethics as a whole, but the actual sports science team, they're not too keen in terms of being reviewed, but they will review themselves internally. So it's a very interesting point there. Though to be fair, about 34 of the recommendations have been accepted, and also the final recommendation was talking about Cricket Australia actively engaging with the ICC to adopt these recommendations to enforce high ethical standards across all of international cricket. So I guess the wider impact of this is to affect the whole game of cricket, I think that most of these can only be a positive, though I can see opposition.
It's not just affecting Aussie cricket, it's affecting cricket as a whole. And cricket, with the 2020 scene, it's becoming bigger and more well known. We're getting teams that would normally play cricket suddenly starting to think, yes, let's play.
And it's back to that.
Being able to be competitive as well. It's another question.
Absolutely, and that's back to that rejection. You almost think, have Cricket Australia rejected the kind of missing out on T20 to play club cricket, because T20 is becoming so more financial, like more wealthy in terms of the money it produces, the crowd it attracts. We want your big players playing international T20, not playing for club. It's an interesting one now. I think that decision's been made.
It's very interesting for the fact that
business sense, almost, isn't it?
Cricket, as we mentioned, is very traditional. And traditionally, the Test match cricket, the 5-day game, is seen as the pinnacle of international cricket. But it has no world tournament. At the moment, there is debates like
they have like a structure, like a ranking structure almost, isn't it? But like there have been talks about a kind of tournament, or a season almost, like a Premier League season.
But you get the average person in the street who'd rather not sit down for 5 days, you can't get to the games. You see the shots they're playing in 2020, and to them, and the way they're bowling, and the very defensive style of bowling, and looking at it, I think that those guys to do that are elite. That is the elite pinnacle of cricket, and so you often hear this, and there's commentators talk about this. are people's perceptions the same as that of the ICC? And we're kind of seeing that in other areas as well, especially with the ethics terms. Yeah.
It's a very interesting point as well, and it's when talking about transitions as well. And that's, if you look in the literature, that's such a pinnacle kind of focus.
Yeah.
But one of the recommendations, the management of players from joining the team and from being dropped and leaving the team needs to be improved. It needs to be more respectful and more compassionate. So it's an interesting one.
So not you're fired and then I'll
yeah, so it's not, almost you see in the media about football games as well, or almost, I guess, so within the recent test match of England, Stuart Broad's been dropped. And it's interesting how that's managed as well, and almost the kind of being dropped can be quite hard. One, you take it, you as the athlete would take it as quite harsh, unless it's been kind of nurtured and explained to you very clearly. And I hope that's the case with Stuart Broad, and I hope he comes back and starts to play well. But yeah, the transitioning from in and out of the teams.
It's the nature of sport though. Like even in my sport, athletics, like you can get coaches who think, I can't train this athlete anymore for X, Y, Z reason. Maybe he or she's not the best athlete.
Or you don't get picked for the university team to go to
yeah, exactly.
Tournament.
So
yeah,
I've kind of experienced that myself where, and I will not mention the coach's name, the coach, until I moved to university, I got the feeling that this coach was going to try and move me on to one of the other coaches to do a longer distance event. So in other words, he was going to drop me from the squad because I'd been injured for a number of years.
Do you think that was to do with the coach-athlete relationship between you two, with the lack of rapport there, or to do with like his perception of your performance?
Both, I believe, because personality, I get along really well now. But personality-wise, it was chalk and cheese, it was a clash. But at the same time, I'd been injured for 2 years, more or less. I had injuries. I got injured, I then needed an operation, and that took me out 2 seasons of athletics. And to him, he's got to make a name as well. He's got to make a judgment call here over who he trains, because resources are finite. National level athlete, but not on any program. So if you get a couple of athletes who are on a program, hang on here, we've got funding here. So it's, these athletes are more likely, I use that in brackets, to achieve because someone said they're going to achieve as because of talent ID.
Yeah.
So let's push these kids on and give them a chance rather than I've given this kid a chance. I don't think I can work with him. I don't think he's got the personality I can work with him. Even though he works hard, I don't think he will push on in my event. Let's move him on to a coach who can.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the opinion he had at the time.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that insight.
No,
and it kind of emphasises the importance of, as we said with that recommendation, of take a duty of care to the athlete as well. And I think this report emphasises it really nicely. And they've also about the anti-harassment code as well. They've asked Cricket Australia to amend that, which has been accepted. It's also interesting that it's recommended that Cricket Australia make it explicit that any kind of prohibition versus this code of conduct or the ethics established by a player or a coach or member of staff may be perceived as bullying.
Right. Okay.
So I think what they mean by that is not you just don't agree with it, but almost if you're kind of actively going against it and actively, not following the ethics because you're, for example, being actively David Warnerish, so actively going out to intimidate and abusively sledge someone or intimidate someone in the dressing room, that will be, I mean, it is bullying, but it will be seen, that consistent behaviour against the code of conduct is bullying. So some very strict guidelines have been offered here, and like we said, most of them have been accepted.
They set out very clear definitions as well, which
it addresses it's interesting how it addresses the kind of grassroots cricket, selectors, the umpires, the sports science team, the players. They talk about who has a say in advising the selectors. They said that the general manager, the team performance unit as a whole, the sports science unit, who have also been told to kind of take into account character. All of them have. they would advise the selectors, so it's not just the selectors choosing the team, it's like a big decision, like a whole group decision.
The way I look at it, the sports science guys, they are coaches. They in effect are part of the coaching staff. Whoever's there, whether it's the selectors, even if at a club level, let's look at the guys who select the draft picks, the guys and girls who end up buying the football players or the soccer players. They're still part of the actual team. They still have to have they might not never ever see the football players they buy or interact with, but they're still part of that team. They still have to relate to that.
Yeah, and so it's just
They have an effect upon the team. So
kind of a call for coaches to be involved in evidence-informed practice and to kind of be the researchers as well. Do your research to inform your practice. That's kind of closing the gap between research and applied practice, which I very thoroughly recommend to any coaches. Do your research.
we ourselves do the research. And we read the research, but really we need to look at the coaches and what they're doing because they can teach us stuff as well.
What needs to be researched into is the
Yeah,
kind of rationale.
exactly.
The rationale comes from the people, the coaches, the players, in my opinion, and that's very crucial. And again, a more detailed report can be found on the link link down below into for Cricket Australia's report,
which is just ironically underneath the subscribe button. So if you smash that, ring the bell. Sports science, not bro science.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been very great. It's been very good to go about this, and they've been very systematic in the review. So they talked about, they almost had such research question, their research questions or their scope to consider whether any cultural, organisational and governance factors.
It's interesting they used the scope of practice. They kept within a scope.
So scope is the title almost for their research question. So what are they investigating? And they've looked into cultural, organisational and governance factors. So they looked at basically all sides of it, into the men's team, into the governing body and to Australian cricket as a whole, which may have contributed to the issues at Newlands. And they've recommended
they've
measures.
it like a research,
very
research
much.
paper, but it's done in a different way. It's not.
It's an executive summary report. And
exactly.
And I think for anyone who's looking to write a report to work with stakeholders, I think is a very professional way of doing it. And so we talked about
you need to be able to do it in a way which the stakeholders can understand and the people you're working with understand. It's like we found out ourselves. If you just throw them a research paper, they're going to look at it and think, A, what the hell is this? B, I can't read it, and goodbye. So
absolutely,
you end up losing your audience straight away, which is something you don't want to do. We want the Australians in this case, or the ethics committee in this case, want to engage the Australian Cricket Board and engage people who, the news, anyone who wants to read this. It's set up in a way that is easy, very easy to understand, very, very easy, I believe.
So just to conclude, what are your thoughts on the overall report? We've talked about it quite in detail, but what's your thoughts on the overall report?
I think it's well written. I think it's written from a standpoint that is independent in nature, even though it's not really that independent. But it's done independent. I like how they've tried to clarify everything in their report, sensible recommendations. Some of them, like releasing the minutes, I can't see that ever happening. I don't think that's very sensible. But it's about trying to create an open and honest environment, even if they have censored some of the document out.
I think maybe it could be that some names are in question that have been mentioned, so like confidentiality.
But you can see that in certain areas, like handful of players, blank, 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 blank. But there's other areas on here, like Australian cricket lost its balance, which they have done. It is an important question to ask, the balance between winning and the spirit of the game. So it addresses all issues and it goes down from a top to bottom approach, I believe, that addresses not only people in Australia but everyone who watches and plays the game of cricket worldwide.
Absolutely, and I agree. I think it's been a very thorough review. The Cricket Australia chairman said that they're committed to using the review as a platform to move forward, but at times he found it very difficult to read and very difficult to agree with. So how do you feel this would be impacted the players and the people involved in Cricket Australia reading this review?
I believe when they've written it down themselves, the temptation to quote selectively is always a problem with reports. and problem with people in general in nature. We see it in politics where people often choose things that support their own arguments rather than looking at logically a fact. If I was an Australian cricketer and I was reading this, I would say it doesn't necessarily go to identity, and probably I wouldn't agree with it. If I'm doing this from a high-level Australian cricket point of view.
They're tagging the core values almost of what they've almost been like, and just kind of telling you need to be different.
There's nothing wrong, there's nothing in the game of cricket, unless you guys find rules that say otherwise, but there's nothing wrong against sledging as such.
It's abusively sledging, that's the issue.
Yeah.
And
it's in cricket, you've gone a direction which is different to other sports in the fact that you've tried to create a clear definition, or not necessarily a clear definition, a definition between sledging and abusive sledging or trash talking, rather than just banning the whole lot or not banning the whole lot. And it's this culture that's come about from an Australian culture that's grown up within schools that has impacted this very report, and the reason why you and I are sitting here today discussing this.
And again, we're very much open to interpretation and opinions, because again, this is from our two lenses of how we perceived it, from someone from different variants of experience with cricket. Comment in the comments, but put a comment below of your opinions. Be interesting to see your side of the debate. The full report, as we said, can be accessed, and it talks about their kind of methodology they've used to kind of come about with these findings. So I do recommend you read that.
We'll put the link in on below.
Anything else to add?
It's one thing to talk to the audience as well is this idea not to, put it simply, a morality tale populated by heroes and villains. It's something they said in their conclusion, and it's something that a lot of Australians will probably look at it like this because they're the ones who are being villainised and they see themselves as the heroes. So we got to look beyond it, try and look beyond it from a logical perspective, but of course we want to hear your opinions. Certainly comment down below,
Yes, just a few kind of shout outs. If you're around the Leeds Beckett area or around the Leeds area or up north, please give ASP-SIG a follow here and get involved with what we have to, the seminars and discussion groups we have to offer. Immersive Sports Science, of course, producing this with the great work from Adam, our own personal Twitter handles, and I look forward to our next collaboration. It's been a pleasure again, Adam, so thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Sports science, not pro science.